Nobody asked him too much detail, but hopefully that's all. really
Okay,
good.
we're live now. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, the Transient Guest Tax Committee of the City of Topeka. And I would have our council members introduce themselves for the record.
Jeff Cohen.
Karen Hiller, District 1.
Okay. So the first thing on the agenda after calling the meeting to order is to approve the minutes from March. So if you've had a chance to look at those, I would entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those approved. Next thing on the agenda is the proposed 2018 TGT budget, and I'll turn it over to Nikki.
Okay. Thank you. So I think everybody, hopefully I got to everybody in the audience with a copy of this. There are copies on the back if anybody walks in or still needs a copy. One thing to note is that these budgets as part of the committees, this is the beginning really of the budget process. TGT budget is one of the first ones that we come out and set. ECD budget, we even started in the very beginning of the year. So typically, we see that we go through several drafts as part of this process. And also, I think I just like to say that to let everybody know, members of the public, that they haven't seen this online yet. Part of that is because it just hasn't been finalized yet, and it's so premature in the process. So the transient guest tax, you all have a copy in front of you, and if you don't mind, I'll walk through it in a little bit of detail, mostly because, number one, we're recommending a few changes this year. And number two, it's just something that kind of every year we have to rewrap our heads around. So I'll go through this with a little bit of detail. One kind of note just off the bat, you all have in front of you, we have a few years of actuals, 1 year of projections, and 1 year of budget. One thing to note in this fund is that we budget this fund to spend 100% of what we get. And what that means is that if we have an awesome year in the hotels and we end up making $3 million of revenues or 3.5 or whatever that may be, we will allocate that out to all of the groups as the percentages delegate. So, if you ever see this number and you're like, man, what if 1 year we get our revenues way higher than that? We don't sit on TGT funds. As we get it, we spend it out. Worst case scenario, we have to do a budget amendment at the end of the year that lets council know it's a good budget amendment. Hey, we made more than we thought. We need to just give them the ability to spend that. So on the revenues, as with all of our forecasts, we always try to be conservative just because we want a realistic number. But like I said, and that being said, we always hope to make more than that. And if we do, then we will spend out the full amount that we make. So on the revenues, first of all, kind of starting with the fund balance on the TGT, we fully intend with this fund to spend the balance as we make it every year to that point. So if in any given year we carry a balance forward, it's really a timing issue. At the end of 16, we had $966,000. That was for a couple of reasons. One was because we didn't have the development agreements set in place for the new recipients, so we'd been collecting on those, but as you know, hadn't signed those development agreements until these last few months, even in 2017. So we'd been building that balance for those groups. Thank you. And then as we got each of those development agreements set, like for example with the downtown plaza, we went ahead and dispersed to them their balance that they'd been building in that fund. So that was part of the reason for the balance. The other reason for the balance would be related to the Sunflower Soccer. 271 is our transient guest tax fund. It's one main fund, but we actually have 3 sub-accounting units, 3 different pots of money, which I'll explain here in a minute. But we do carry a balance in the Sunflower Soccer for a couple of reasons, and we'll get an update on that later in the meeting as well. So the only reason there's a balance there is for those few reasons. As you can see, looking ahead to the end of 2018, we want to budget to spend down that balance. We want this money to be out there in the community. There's no reason to sit on a balance in the TGT fund. So starting on the top in 2018, on the revenue side of TGT, we have the TGT base, and then we have 2 additional 1%. So this is something that in the council meeting a couple of months ago, we started getting, I don't even remember what the item was, we started talking about the TGT fund, and then there was this whole conversation about 5%, 1%. So let's reset every time we talk about this and just make sure we're all on the same page. The TGT tax that gets applied to every hotel stay is 7% total. 5% of that we consider the TGT base. 1% of that is for the TGT soccer portion, and then 1% of that is for that new allocation that was formerly for the historic projects and is now for those 4 entities that are listed below. So those second 1% are the ones that were per resolution passed by the governing body for very specific purposes. That TGT base is the one that we have a little bit more flexibility in. So does that make sense, starting from the revenue side? And so we've tried to, in the budget, do a much kind of cleaner job of showing those 3 separate pots, with always the reminder that at the end of the day, this is one big fund, kind of from an audit and a budget perspective. It's one fund with kind of 3 separate purposes. So going down to the expenditure portion, we have this really categorized as we do a series of grants, transfers, and allocations. So there's different ways that we spend this money. Starting from the top with Visit Topeka and the Visit Topeka Bid Fund, that would be coming from that base amount. So that 5% base is where the majority of where that is from. And the reason this came up in the council meeting was we talked about establishing a 3-year contract with Visit Topeka on that, which was approved. Everybody agreed that was a great idea. So those allocations are based on a percentage split of that base. And what we have proposed in the contract and what we're reflecting here would be a percentage of that total amount. So traditionally, for example, in the 17 budget, what we show is that 79% of the TGT base would be going to Visit Topeka, and then 11% would be going for the bid fund. The remainder of the percent there for the 10%, for example, in 17, goes for a couple of different purposes. One would be part of that is for the admin fee that we have to pay, and then part of that would be for an internal transfer that we make to the zoo because that's one of the major tourist attractions in the state. In the 18 budget, we're proposing a couple of recipients, which we'll explain here in a minute, of that base that do detract from the overall amount of money that Visit Topeka would get.
Could I get you to review the percentage splits that we're starting with again before we go forward?
Okay, so in 17,
Right.
it's 79%, 11%, and 10%.
79% goes to Visit Topeka.
Uh-huh.
11% to the bid fund.
Yep.
And
And then the remainder gets
10%.
split out between the, it's the zoo.
the admin fee and the zoo?
Actually, it's just the zoo. The admin fee, we kind of take off the top from the revenues. And then
Oh.
actually for 18, I don't have the split based on the new entities in there. That's part of what, it's kind of chicken and the egg. Once we approve the budget, then we set up the split in the contract. So it kind of, that split will change based on what this committee would approve.
Okay, the admin then comes off the top against all
All the revenues, yep,
the revenues?
Yeah.
On a percentage basis?
Yes.
Or on a,
percentage, yep.
and what percent is that?
I
Two?
believe that it's
One?
2%. So yeah, that one's confusing. You don't really want that in that total percent because.
I'm just trying to balance it, trying to
Yeah.
figure out where the moving parts are.
So in 2018, we've got the Visit Topeka and the Visit Topeka BID. The Sunflower Soccer Association, that amount of money is based on the 1% that we get into that designated portion of the fund. And at this point, we always budget for them to spend 100% of what they make. For a reason I can explain now, or even as part of the Sunflower Soccer presentation, at this point, we have actually paid off one of the projects that we had set out to do for the Sunflower Soccer project, and we are still paying off the second one. So starting really with this past year, in 2016, they have been starting to build up a balance in that fund, so we're not actually spending that full amount each year. So that's kind of a future decision to be made, is how to spend that balance. But we always want to budget to spend 100% of that. That way, when we do come in with a project that meets the original resolution, we can do that.
Nikki, I'm going to interrupt just for a
Uh-huh.
second. On the sunflower soccer, I thought at one point we discussed that they were bonded, and we had talked about paying down the bonds. Is that correct?
Yes. So originally, there were two separate projects set up. One was for the sanitary sewer project, and then one was for the restrooms and concession stands. The sanitary sewer portion, we did pay that one off because it ended up costing, it was about $600,000, and we built up the cash balance, so we paid that one off. That's good news. We didn't have to, there was no need to do a special assessment or pay it off in longer term because we had the cash built up. The restroom project was more like a $3 million project, so that one we'll have to continue to pay unless it's, I think if it was a policy decision that we wanted to pay that one down rather than starting a new long-term project, then we could look towards converting it to that. But at this point, that one is a special assessment that
Okay.
we've been financing.
Okay, and I'm sure we'll hear more on the update, so thank you.
Yes. Okay, so in the transfer amount, this is where we have a couple of new recipients. One thing that I would preface this with is that for those of you that were here, I think the last time was probably in the 2014 budget, there used to be a tradition of a lot more direct recipients of TGT funds. So there was a process internally where we'd give money to groups like Heartland Park, Riverfront, all of those groups would come to the TGT committee. And what we've done is really tried to fold that process into the Visit Topeka process. And that's really a clean process that's worked out really great, that allows those kind of applicants to go through Visit Topeka. That way it can be a citywide concerted effort towards making sure that those funds go to the right place. So there's a few cases here where we're recommending that we actually give pieces of the TGT funds back to a couple of groups, kind of in that, I'd say, in a similar way to that we'd done in previous years. And that's simply because of budget constraints. So we've been tasked by the governing body to find money for streets without raising taxes and meeting a pavement condition index goal of at least a 60 or above. As you can imagine, that requires millions of dollars, which we've already taken a couple of steps for, and most of that isn't related to the TGT fund, other than you'll see with the 2018 budget, with the whole budget as we propose in a couple of weeks, there's no rock left unturned. If we want to find an additional $2 million without raising taxes, we have to look at every fund, and no fund is going kind of untouched or unchanged with this next budget. So it's exciting, and we believe that it's kind of the path that we need to take to do what's been tasked. So really that's just kind of a preface for the fact that this isn't the only fund that you'll see some changes in what we're recommending. So the couple of examples here of things that had previously been funded out of other sources would be the Riverfront Park, which is that first $50,000, the $48,000 for downtown park maintenance, and then the $22,000 historical capital tours. So those are three things that in the current year or even prior years had been funded either from the general fund or gone unfunded. It kind of depends on which of the ones we're talking about. And this year in the 2018 budget, what we're recommending is that come out of the TGT base of money. The reasoning would be that these are three things that are qualified expenses under the TGT taxes, and we believe speak pretty directly to tourism and visitors in town. So kind of from the top there, the Riverfront Park, the prior year usage, so that $106,000 you see in 2015, that was actually from the previous 1% historic pot of money. It's
Different.
It was a different purpose, but went to the same group.
Overland
So-
Station.
No.
Well, no,
No.
actually, there was Overland Station and the
And
Riverfront
the
Park were
Riverfront
two
Park,
separate.
okay. And do we not have a balance on the Riverfront park development? I thought there was like 394,000 or something like that.
So the Riverfront Park development, there actually is money in a project, but that is specifically stated that it's for the capital improvements, and Mary can speak to that if needed, but per the original resolution, that was sent and designated in this fund for the actual
Development of a park.
park project.
Okay.
You all had a presentation at the governing body level, gosh, that was maybe February or March now, where interim city manager came forward with kind of 3 separate ways. We can
Yeah.
either buy properties, we can clear the land, we can deed it to the county, we can transfer the funds. I think there's still kind of decisions to be made from that front. What this money actually represents is money towards the operations of the Riverfront Authority to be working with a consultant to work on the overall riverfront development plan.
And is that the current consultant that the Riverfront Authority is working with now?
So, I mean, without, the way that this would work, and the way that it works with the 2017 funding is that we have an agreement with the Riverfront Authority.
Right.
We transfer them the funds, and then they have an agreement with whoever they choose. So I don't want to speak for sure that that's who they
Right.
would choose to
Okay.
go with. I think there's some, some
Discussion.
interesting,
Yeah.
that's something they have to navigate on their end, but they have come forward to the city and said that they believe in order for that whole development and the concept to move forward, that they would need to continue having funds to do with their operations. And kind of given the choices and giving the funding scenarios, this is the one that we believed was the most appropriate at this time.
And I'm not sure about the other committee members, but maybe we need to hear from them as far as what this 50,000 would go towards.
I think you may be right in that, just following this conversation, I would suggest that these are really 2 separate line items. Because the old riverfront park was that capital fund that went toward accumulating the money to buy the land for the park on the north side only. I mean, it was linked with the Great Overland Station project, and that's all that was for. And this 106,000 is the final payment of that old contract.
Right.
And Nikki's right. I mean, this 50,000 that's in there for the river is really for the Riverfront Authority, which is quite different. And that's operating money, and it's to go, that authority is doing master plan management and then trying to bring it down to implementation for the entire riverfront area, the north bank, the river itself, and the south side, and the levee trails along it. I mean, kind of a much more master riverfront plan that actually stretches from the western end of the county to the eastern end of the county as far as the river goes. So they're quite different, and truthfully, that makes it new in that it's not, none of these 3 are things we've been doing regularly out of the operating fund before. That commitment.
Except for the zoo.
The 3 new ones, the 3 new ones, the Riverfront Authority one is new. I think it happened in 2016, but the council wasn't involved in that decision.
It is in the 17 budget, as is the downtown park maintenance in the general fund.
Correct, but it was new.
In 17, yeah,
It
that's
was
true.
new in 17. The park maintenance is brand new. We've those of us who are here were involved in that. And the historic capital tours hasn't even been voted on. It's just in the process of negotiation, and the state said they wanted the city to help pay, and somebody apparently said we would. So
Okay.
they're really
Well, and that's why I
new.
think we needed an additional meeting, because I don't even see anybody here from the Overland Station and the Riverfront Authority. Well, Vince is, I guess, he's the treasurer, or he's the secretary.
Yeah, he is.
But I think that I've read in their minutes that they've paid a consultant out of their funds. And if this is going to pay for a consultant, I would like to really know if this is is this the same consultant? We're just picking up the salary now? Is this a new consulting arrangement? I think we need more information about how the 50,000 is to be spent. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they would be happy to supply that.
Right.
They've given me backup information, so we can supply that either in a meeting, outside a meeting, whatever you think is appropriate.
okay.
And, to your point about, they are 2 different entities, and I'd say that's I showed it
Different
in one line
managing
item.
agents, different
They really should be
uses.
2 line items on this sheet, and in the budget, this is just kind of trying to make it pretty and
Short.
understandable, but in the budget, that would be a contractual line item
Okay.
versus the Riverfront Park, we actually transfer into that project
That too.
to build up. So we'd pay it out in different ways, but I could see how that's confusing having that in one line. So however, I can best facilitate getting more information on that. The downtown park maintenance, that is one that we've got somebody in the room that can definitely speak to that. We do have a contract, which I believe you all have seen, that lines out how much we would spend in each year, who would do what, as far as our relationship with the Downtown Topeka Foundation. So we can definitely speak more to that today. I'd say on the Historic Society Capitol Tour, that's a conversation right now. I mean, Mary can speak to where we are with the draft on that. This is simply, it's an effort that came up in the community. There seems to be some support, and this is kind of our way of saying who is going to fund it, how, what, when, and where, and why. And so this is one way of getting it in somewhere so that we can then take some action or not. But that's a very current, I mean, as we speak, kind of conversation, so.
This is
it's-
beginning of the discussions on.
Sure, yep.
Well, and it's been, as far as the council's engagement, it's been, because it was kind of tough to figure out where to put it and how to get it targeted and get some action, it's been in our legislative agenda in recent years
Right.
to
get 'em up
direct
with, yeah.
staff and anybody else who could help to help move that,
Okay.
at least get it open.
And then the zoo, I skipped over that, not intentionally, but that's really one that we had been doing, and we'd proposed doing it to the same level as we were in 2017, where they would get a split of the TGT base.
And that's been happening historically for how many years? It was
know I looked at
happening
that.
4 years ago, I know that.
I know I looked at that history last year. I think it's been a very long time that that's been something that's been coming out of
As
the TGT
part of the tourism,
fund.
yeah. Okay.
Just to clarify on that history, because I think I did this for everybody at budget time. For a long time, it was just a $200,000 transfer. And then as budgets got tighter and people asked questions, it got tagged with the zoo as its particular destination.
So in other words,
Probably
we just,
7 years ago.
we just transferred 200,000 from the TGT funds to the city, and then we clarified that it was for the zoo because of
Pretty much.
tourism. Okay.
Pretty much.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that
know
is
that.
true, that kind of in the past, depending on when you look, it just looked like a transfer out, and for what reason, just looked like money going to the general fund.
Okay.
So maybe I'll skip to the bottom 4, only because
Okay.
I think those are
No.
somewhat simple. I mean, they're fresh on everybody's mind, and those are very specifically designated out in the 1% resolution. So that's kind of one where, without going back to that first resolution, there's not wiggle room on this one. The 1% allocation on the bottom, that was voted on, of course, by that was in fall of 2015 now that the groups were designated. Over the past year or so, we've been working with each agency on the agreements. The dollar amount that you see there is just based on the split that was based on their original allocation. So the 3.4 million for downtown plaza, et cetera, for each different group, this is kind of their share of that based on each given year. As you can see in 17, in that projection column, we showed that so it looks like they're getting more in 17 than they are in 18, and that's because for most of them, the balance goes to them actually in 17 because of when we sign the development agreements. The balance from 16 and what we get in 17 will be paid out in 17. So for 18, that's simply based on the share, based on that original resolution. So however you'd like to, I mean, whether you'd like to circle back to a couple of those items, maybe kind of talk about what and when needs to be discussed next, wherever you'd like to go with that.
I would recognize either member on the council for questions, and then if not, I think we have quite a few people that are interested in speaking to the budget for next year. So, Councilman Cohen, do you have any questions on this budget?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Councilwoman Hiller?
Not at this point. We'll talk about it more later in
Okay.
terms of
Well,
how
we
it
may
can work.
have questions after we hear from the public also.
Correct.
So I think, Brett, you had said that you wanted to speak to this. Do you want to go ahead and come up to the podium?
Hello. Brett Auden, Visit Topeka. A couple comments first is that not just Visit Topeka, but the entire travel and tourism industry in Topeka disagrees that two of these three speak on tourism. Maintenance for streets and a consultant are not what the state, or all states for that matter, when they created the transient guest tax, had in mind when they decided to start taxing this. What Visit Topeka does is we sell the community and we enhance the quality of life for the community. And we are an economic development organization, and to me that means that we have a definitive return on investment for everything we do. And I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. The last thing that you want to do is cut sales in any organization. Mike Bell, our VP of Sales, made a comment earlier that likened it to an old hotel analogy, that in the hotel world, the last thing you want to do is cut sales to pay the janitor, because pretty soon the janitor will have nothing to do. The law of unintended consequences is a good example of what is going to happen here to the travel and tourism world. And I'll speak on three parts here. First, the taking $100,000. Now, let me preface, it's $122,000 is what is being potentially taken. Visit Topeka already has in the budget money for the state capitol. And this is something that I've been personally working on for a couple years and I believe in. So I completely agree with using money to keep the capitol open on weekends. That's something that should have been done a long time ago by the state. So I'm very excited that this is going to happen. So let's just talk about a $100,000 loss to what Visit Topeka, what that would mean. So again, three parts here. This would result in a larger overall loss than $100 to the city of Topeka when it comes to sales tax revenues. This prohibits the ability for Visit Topeka to create more money for the city of Topeka in sales tax revenues, and it has a decrease in the overall quality of life for Topekans. If we jump into number one, taking $100,000 from Visit Topeka to the general fund is a very short-sighted move that will have a larger overall loss. Oxford Economics is a national company that does tourism studies, and we are actually working with them right now. Hopefully this summer they're going to be doing a study just on Topeka. Right 2 years ago, the closest city we found that's very comparable to us is Springfield, Missouri. Similar in size. We have a similar occupancy in the hotels. We have a similar average daily rate in the hotels. What their study found is that they have a return on investment for every $1 that their visitors organization spends, they bring $61 into the community. We don't have that here yet. We don't have those numbers, so I don't want to say 61 to 1. But what we do have are numbers from what our sales staff brings to Topeka on a year in and year out basis. If you look just at 2016, our sales staff brought 49,000 rooms to the community through conventions and trade shows that we went out, found, and brought to Topeka, 49,000 rooms. That generated $36 million to the community. Off of our $1.5 million budget, that is a 24 to 1 return on investment. So if you break out what does that look like to $100,000 when it comes to sales tax dollars, that is a $216,600 sales tax collection that the city would see with us spending $100,000. If you flip that around, what that means is if you take 100,000 transient guest tax dollars, you would also lose $216,600 in sales tax revenues that visitors come and spend in Topeka. Number two, the ability for us to create that money is the other side of that, like I said. I can make a very compelling argument that rather than take $100,000 from Visit Topeka, you should find money in your general fund and give us more money. Because what we do is we create money for the city. Again, we bring people to town who spend money, not just the businesses prosper, but the city prospers as well by sales tax collections. Number 3, we are the only organization in the community that not only promotes quality of life for our residents, but we also create quality of life for the residents as well in terms of festivals, different things we do, finding discounts, working with large partners in the community. I went on the 2016 census and looked and made sure I have my numbers right. The 2016 census shows 126,265 residents in the Topeka city limits that lived in 52,711 households. I would imagine that if we asked the majority of the households in Topeka if they had an option of losing $2.31 or allowing Visit Topeka to continue to create all these festivals and events that they can go to for free, they would probably rather have something to do on the weekends for them and their children than to save that $2. The last thing that I will talk about is I went to our budget, and I went to our 2018 budget that we've actually already started to try to determine what would a $100,000 cut to our budget look like. And I'll give you a couple examples of what would most likely happen if we were to cut our budget. One sales employee that's dedicated to convention sales, bringing conventions to town. All trade show and sales call travel for our entire sales staff, no longer going to trade shows and sales events to bring those people to town. Our 2 most expensive events that we put on every year that are free to the community are Cyclovia, the bicycle festival, and the Downtown Jazz and Food Truck Festival. Each of those cost over $10,000 for us to put on. Those would probably be discontinued as a way for us to manage. We also sponsor other many community-wide ethnic festivals, India Fest, the Fiesta. We give money to a lot of them to help them get their festivals going on. That would have to stop. Ironically enough, today being the day, it is National Travel and Tourism Week. And tonight is Hospitality Appreciation Night. This is something we started 3 years ago when I started. And tonight, for example, we are inviting all hospitality employees in the city to go to Trampo Laser Rockball Park. We are feeding them, and they get to bring their kids, and they get to have a good free time. That costs considerable money out of our budget to do. That's something that we probably want to be able to do. Last year, we did the same thing at the zoo. The year before that, I believe it was the Discovery Center. And that's something that we try to give back to all the hospitality employees that work on a day in and day out basis. And then finally, we have a lot of partners that we give money to help bring events to town and all that. So other examples that we would have to cut funding could be Arts Connect with the First Friday Art Walk advertising, NOTO and events that are going on there, concerts at TPAC, concerts at the Expo Center that we help fund, and our heritage tourism partners. We have recently created a rat card program free of charge to them, where we have designed a website. We have designed rat cards for them. We paid for the rat cards. We paid for the racks. We do a lot of online advertising for them. That is something that we would have to look at cutting back and doing as well. So this is something that would not just touch me and my staff. This would touch the entire community. It is $100,000 is significant to Visit Topeka. That is a 7% cut in our budget. And what we do is we do things that allow our community to attend events for free while we look at outside visitors to pick up the cost of that. And if we can't reach those outside visitors, then the community will not have as many opportunities to do fun things that keep them in town and talking positively about Topeka. Any questions?
So Brett, to sum it up, you're basically not supporting the 50,000 for the riverfront, and you're not supporting the 48,443 for the Pocket Park maintenance. And I might remind everyone that Pocket Park maintenance discussion started with Councilman Harmon brought it up as to why we could not take it out of TGT funds. And I think that's you know, where this kind of led to the discussion with putting it in the budget. So we're in just discussion stages. So, but that would be what you're against, is the idea that you take 50,000 and give it to the Riverfront Authority for a consultant, and the 48,443 that we would give to DTI to take care of the parks, the PAGA parks.
Correct. Again, those two examples might fall within the written guidelines of what is acceptable use of TGT funds, but that is not what any state or tourism professional ever would have recommended be a reason to create a transient guest tax in any community, so to help clean sidewalks and water plants and to hire consultants. So yes, we would be against that.
Okay. Are there any other questions of Brett? Karen?
If I can ask a question first of Nikki and then Brett. And this is without taking a position on this, just exploring numbers, and I want the numbers to be hard numbers, whatever we're talking about. I think all of us got it, but Visit Topeka sent out a really fabulous collection of documents for their first quarter report, and I actually read them. And I thought that the reports of what you're doing were good, and they have a wonderful financial report that goes back a number of years so we can see trends. And for a long time, and this one, it goes all the way back 10 years, so it goes back to 2007, and just using the 5% that they get, that total revenue kind of wobbled around from 1.5 million to a little over 1.6. It averaged 1.6 million for a long time, and then in 2014 jumped to 1.7 and stayed there. And then in 2016, the actual came in at 1.842. So it's been growing a little bit, and some of the things that Brett just listed are things that are new, and probably that extra 100,000 helped. Plus great management and kind of retooling the whole look at it, which I know that you did. So my question first for Nikki is, what expected revenue did you use for this proposed budget that therefore by percentages you came up with these new numbers?
We just added 2% onto the 2017 budget.
Okay.
But again, kind of to the original point, that definitely shouldn't be seen as limiting. If we bring in a 10% growth next year, then all the recipients would get, everybody that has a percentage share would get more.
So you added 2% to the total and then netted that out to 2% on the expected revenue for
Yes.
Visit Topeka. Brett, we've been at 51% occupancy in the hotels, roughly, and people are building hotels. So on the one hand, that's been a challenge sometimes. On the other hand, we must be getting slightly ticking up the net. What is your expectation of what's going to happen to that occupancy rate and therefore, hopefully, revenue in the next couple of years?
In 2018, we will see an additional 300 hotel rooms in the market. 2 are a Hilton brand, which is a higher tier brand, and the other hotel being the Cyrus Hotel. All 3 hotels will have a very prime rate comparable to other competing cities. And what that will do is that will drive the rate up for all hotels in Topeka. I think for 2018, we are expecting probably no more than a 2% increase overall next year. But the year after that, we would be expecting probably a lot higher, just because those 3 hotels are going to bring a different type of clientele in. It allows us to reach a different demographic as well. I will point out to what you said, Karen, about when that increase started in 2014. That was my first year, and I will not take credit for that increase, but what I will say is that in 2014, the city manager at that time increased the amount of money going to Visit Topeka out of the transient guest tax. And so during that same time that you're seeing a large increase start to happen in actual collections of transient guest tax, is at the same time that Visit Topeka started receiving more money that we were able to start utilizing to advertising and marketing the community.
Is that the year we restructured the bid fund
Correct.
issue and gave it?
Correct. So there's a direct correlation to Visit Topeka receiving more money and using it for marketing the community and more money coming into town.
Well, and I might
Thank
add
you.
on that as a history lesson here is that I was here 2014 on TGT, and we had, I mean, it looked like Visit Topeka increased a lot, but what we did was we combined and we visited with all the entities that were priorly getting the money independent of Visit Topeka, and everyone agreed that yes, it would be best to give it to Visit Topeka, and then they dole it out. If you look back at the 2013, I think we had more entities that were receiving the funds.
Well, a couple years before that, we did it, but everyone didn't agree. Anyway, it worked.
And part of that was the Heartland Park thing. So
Yes.
that was why we said, let's give it to Visit Topeka, and they'll dole it out instead of, and that's why you see an increase in 2014.
And we feel that we have a good program with that as well. Before any money is given out to the partners that I talked about or that you're talking about, I sit down with them and we discuss what we feel is the best use of those dollars. And I think that in the past that always wasn't happening. It was more just a blind check, here you go. And we feel that with the marketing expertise of my staff, that we can help guide them how to utilize those dollars more efficiently. And they are doing so. You're starting to see more events at a lot of different venues. And there's a lot of reasons why that is, but I would like to think that one of those is because we're assisting them better with how to use those dollars.
Well, a good example would be the digital board that Evel Knievel just put in, which you guys have provided the materials for, but it's awesome. Thanks. I'm just trying to get the parameters of how these dollars could move from year to year also.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay?
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Matt?
First of all, I want to congratulate Nikki on graduating from leadership Greater Topeka yesterday. So she's busy working over there. But the other thing is, I'll say these things are tough. I mean, finding $2 million without raising taxes is very difficult. So I do want to say that I understand that effort. I'll admit I'm the novice in Topeka on Visit Topeka and tourism. But I will mention that I actually ran the Convention and Visitors Bureau Visit Tulsa for 17 years, and so I do know a little bit about the topic in general. The one thing I'll say is it's sort of a simple, and Brett said it in a more articulate way, but it's kind of like a pizza place. Pizza place needs to either generate more revenue or cut expenses. We all know if they cut their marketing, they're probably going to sell less pizzas, and so I start worrying. I'm not worried just about what transient guest tax we produce from this marketing. I actually start worrying about the actual sales tax and cutting off our nose to spite our face. I did call a gentleman named Bill Geist, and he's really probably the top tourism consultant in the United States today. And I said, hey, just give me an idea. Is this happening around the United States? Are we starting to see lodging tax used for other purposes, and especially for maintenance and things like that, as opposed to marketing? So no, we're not seeing a lot of that. We're seeing more increases than we are decreases. But in the cases that we are seeing decreases, and he actually used one specific example, which is Buffalo, New York, within a year to 2 to 3 years, you're actually seeing a significant decrease in tourism spending, and then because of that, a significant decrease in sales tax revenue. So we always had in Tulsa, we always did these ads, and one of the things we loved is, because not a lot of times citizens don't realize how much economic impact tourism has on us, and we do these ads, and it would say they came to our community and they took the little soaps, but look what they left. And the left was police cars, fire trucks, and street maintenance. So these are all good things too. I mean, Riverfront Authority, that's important. We've actually been working with Brett and Vince and their team to keep this capital open on weekends. I think that's a good use of these funds, because we think that it'll drive the revenue that we need. So I know it's a tough thing, but always get scared when we're thinking about cutting marketing.
So Matt, you're agreeing then that the 48,443 and the 50,000 for the consultant, we need to find somewhere else than tourism dollars?
Yeah, I'm scratching my head because we need that. We need
Yeah.
riverfront.
Yeah.
I just think, I'm not sure this is the right place for it.
Okay.
And not the right place to take the dollars, but we do need to work on our riverfront. That's important. And
Okay.
maybe it's one of the organizations that I'm involved in that has to get a little bit more involved in helping to fund that.
What
I do
did he
I
say?
see them, go ahead. By the way, I'm not speaking for my board. But, and in the maintenance, to me, that seems like that would be general fund. And the city would honor the agreement to maintain those parks.
Okay,
So.
okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to Kurt?
Thank you. Kurt Young, Topeka Lodging Association. I didn't have the time to really dig into numbers, but Brett has done an excellent job of presenting the statistical side of it and the impact that this would have. But the point I'd like to make, and he did make it as well, but I want to reinforce it and maybe go a different direction with it, is that as long as, I'm trying to think back when we really resurrected the Topeka Lodging Association, and I think it was around 2005, 2006. And I look at the success that we've had jointly from a city and an association and from an industry, travel and tourism industry perspective, the success that we've made over these years of recognizing the potential impact that transient guest tax dollars bring to the community in terms of the old saying, a rising tide floats all boats. I mean, that's exactly what it does. And we've done a good job over the years of taking these transient guest tax dollars and putting them where they will create a return on investment. And as a result of that, it's really grown a spirit of cooperation, and you've just recently, over the last year now, we've been talking about things that we're going to do with these 4 projects that we got approved over the last year. And I really think this is taking a step backwards. And I think it needs to be rethought. I would agree with both Brett and Matt that the 50,000 and the 48,000 for those 2 entities, you know, not saying anything about the merit of the projects, but I think it's a wrong place to use transient guest tax dollars. I think that 100,000, you know, when I look back 10 years ago and some of the places and things that we were doing with transient guest tax dollars, we've done a good job of recognizing the correlation between increasing transient guest tax dollars in wise investments and the corresponding rise in the sales tax that goes along with it. If we make this move with $100,000 now this year and recognize, as Brett has so eloquently described, the negative impact that will have from a sales tax perspective, then what happens next year when we need to find another $1 million or $2 million? Everybody, the impact carries forward. I don't know whether I'm articulating what I'm thinking up here very well, but it is an impact that will just continue to carry forward as we take away money from the one source that we have where we can actually create a return on investment. So, and that's really all I've got to say.
Councilwoman Hiller?
And Kurt, if I can ask you one question, and this is I'm exploring all these different, we've got moving parts, 3 big moving parts, and then moving parts within each one, and then other funding sources outside that. So I'm just trying to sort it out. I think this is a good challenge for us it's bringing some things into focus. In terms of the riverfront, it's already been discussed by Chairwoman Schwartz that we probably need to know exactly what they want it for and have them flesh out where they want to go with it. But assuming that that occurs, we have a different 1% here that we allocated to Evel Knievel, to developing some tourism sites, and those dollars, that 1% was invested in developing those attractions so that they would then be part of the big picture that's being promoted with the 5% and would bring heads, and they were chosen based on bringing heads on beds. If it were fleshed out satisfactorily, would there really be any difference? Would the riverfront concept, developing the riverfront and bringing people to events and on the river and so on, be really any different than consideration of the plaza or Evel Knievel or Constitution Hall in terms of why it would be funded and what it would produce?
I think the thing that you'd need to look at, and you've already hit the part of it, it needs to be fleshed out what the money's for, but also how long is it going to be before that $50,000 investment creates any return?
Agreed.
Okay?
Agreed.
Is it going to be this year, next year, or 10 years from now? So if that $50,000 is, if we're just throwing something on the wall to see if it sticks,
Understood.
okay, then no, it's not a good investment.
But if it is, and I don't want to give it away because there'll be time for that, but if the weir is going to be reconstructed with city funds within the next 18 months, and all of a sudden we have through traffic for kayaks and canoes on the river, and it's managed right, those folks are hungry, they stay overnight, arguably that is a whole new book of business for us that's really exciting. I'm not suggesting it come out of the 5% at this point, just would it have been, fleshed out with its return on investment just like the other ones had? Because the hoteliers supported the others because they did demonstrate that in time anyway, they would produce a return. So.
I'd have to hedge my bet
Okay.
until I.
And I said if and only if, it's just that if it did prove out, if the application was, okay.
Any
Thanks.
other questions?
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the 2018 TGT budget? The one thing we haven't talked about that I've received some emails from constituents is I thought we transferred the parks over to the county, and both of these issues are Riverfront Park and downtown park maintenance. So I just wanted to add that was kind of a kink in it that, maybe it's something that we can in the future talk about with the county. I don't know. But this is just discussion stage at this point for the 2018 budget. We don't have to take action today. And if we go, back to the budgeting process, I think we'll make that decision at a later date. I think Doug told me today we don't have to make any decisions today. So,
Councilwoman, do we need to prepare a recommendation for council tonight?
that's a good question for Nikki and Mary.
So the way the process has been working the past couple of years is that it has taken several meetings to discuss and finalize it. At some point, you will have a committee report to bring forward. If there's no action in the committee, I don't think they owe anything until you've voted on the budget within the committee. I would say that it would be encouraged that we do the next meeting somewhat quickly, mostly because there are other budgets and funds that depend on this one. Whether something is or isn't here, well, then is it going somewhere else, and how and if and where and when. So this ties into a lot of different things. The moving parts, there's a lot of moving parts to this, so I would say that I would definitely request that a follow-up meeting be definitely before, if possible, we propose the whole budget on June 2nd. So sometime within the next few weeks would be ideal, so that then the proposed budget can reflect what was approved by the committee.
Well, and I don't know that we're, ready to vote on this today, whether or not we take that 100,000 out of of this budget and try to find it in the general fund budget for both of those two things. It sounds to me like the 22,000 is okay for keeping the Capitol open on the weekends for those tours. So,
Didn't Visit Topeka say they've already budgeted for that in their budget?
okay, that's a good question.
Yes. Yeah, that's something we actually had that in our budget for last year as well, with my fingers crossed all year last year that we would get it done last year. And we didn't, so we kept working. So that is in the budget. Again, that's something that I believe in, getting that open. So absolutely.
Thank you, Brett. So, Nikki, with that in their budget, do we need a new budget document for the TGT funds? Do we need to go back to the discussion as to take that 22,000 out then of this 2018 budget?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Brett and I can talk about that. I'm sure what he
Okay.
would say is that if we took these other things out of their budget for 18, then, I don't want to assume it's staying in there. If the rest of your budget's getting cut, well, then you have an overall budget that you have to cut. So I'd want to talk to him to make sure
Okay.
that
Okay.
I don't know that we could assume we'll take this out and the other things, and then that they could keep doing it. I would want to talk to him before I bring that back.
Okay, Mary?
But let me add, though, that we have executed a contract with the Kansas State Historical Society to start tours on Saturday, commencing the first Saturday in June and extending to the end of May of 2018. And the amount is about $22,080.
But it's covered
That's
already,
Yeah.
correct?
I'm not sure where the funds
Have
are
we
coming
discussed
from,
that
but
with Visit Topeka yet?
I have not,
Okay.
but
But this budget
this
is
is for,
January through December
Maybe we're
of
both-
2018. So
Correct.
the June through December of this year needs to come out of 2017 budget, right?
yes, I
Okay.
would think so.
So we're okay there,
Yes,
okay,
for 2017.
for 2017.
But we have made a commitment
For
for
20
January to May of 2018.
Okay.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing from Brett is as long as we're not cutting on the other end, he's got that covered in his budget for this year, and you were expecting to cover it in the future.
Correct.
Okay.
Again, Nikki and I can talk about what would be the easiest way to do it. To me, the easiest way would be that I already have it in my budget. I would be happy to write the check to them and continue. We have it in the budget that once it starts on June 3rd, we will pay for it through the end of this year. Obviously, it goes into next year as well. We would have continued to have that in our budget at that time as well.
Thank you.
Well, that's really good news, that starting this June 3rd is the
Yes.
weekends. Can we announce that to the public, that it
Yeah.
is open
Sure.
for visiting and tours?
Very, very close. It is coinciding with the Capital City Food Truck Festival that is being moved to downtown on 10th Street that same day.
That's awesome.
And so you will have the farmer's market in the morning in the parking lot, the judicial parking lot. And then starting at 11 o'clock, you will see almost 60 food trucks downtown with kids' events and games and music.
And this will occur on weekends, on Saturdays at the Capitol building will be
Not
open with
60 food
tours?
trucks every
No,
Saturday.
no, I
But yes,
But the build-
Saturday afternoon, Saturdays from 10 to 4, I believe, you know.
The tours, I think,
tours?
yeah, 3 tours
Yeah.
between 10 and 4, yes.
Yeah.
We've been fighting for that for as long as I've been on the council. That is really great
Very
news.
exciting.
So, yeah. And I've been to other state capitals, and there's quite a few that are open, but there's a lot that are not. So we're getting up there.
Well, and those food trucks can come back on their own if they want. It turns out lots of folks are going through the Capitol, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's great news. Well, if there's nothing else then on the budget, and we've,
Excuse me,
Okay.
two things.
okay,
One, you mentioned the county on the riverfront. I think that, and Vince is the secretary, there is a riverfront authority meeting scheduled on Wednesday, the
Next Wednesday, which would be what,
17th. And so if this body wanted to invite the Riverfront Authority to come and make a presentation, if we scheduled our meeting sometime a little after the 17th, that would give enough time to invite them and let them have a meeting and prepare a little bit. I don't know if Pat's going to be here for that one, but anyway, they actually have a meeting whereby if an invitation came from this body, it would time pretty well to ask them to come back. You mentioned the county as well. I don't know if we want to invite the county or at least reach out and let the Riverfront Authority guide a little bit, whether they would want to represent that just themselves or I know that engaging the county long-term is something that's in motion at that level, so.
And we do have we have to discuss that at some point, that we did transfer Parks and Rec over to the county, and then we have a riverfront park being developed by the city. So I think that is a future discussion. We're still a ways from there, but.
It depends. That's why I brought it up, because if you want to invite them now, we will be part of that discussion if we want to be. Otherwise, I wanted to ask a second question of Nikki before we leave the budget this time. Nikki, to the 1% allocation that goes to the Plaza, Evo, Constitution, and Jayhawk, if you could refresh me, those are 12-year contracts?
That was a 12-year tax.
A 12-year tax. Yes. And the way their contracts are set up is that they get a percentage of the revenue rather than a fixed amount of money?
Yes, and I can send you that exact split. I don't have it in front of me, but the way that it's written is that each year they would get a percentage of the total up to their cap. And the reason that it wasn't just set as a certain amount every year is because everybody wants them to get their money earlier so they can do their project earlier. So if we'd taken, like for the downtown plaza, exactly that 3.4 divided by 12 divided by 4 and only given them that amount, it could take them longer to get to the total versus if we give them based on their percentage split, they're going to hopefully get more each year and hit that cap earlier than that 12 years.
I guess I'm just looking at that total number. If we were wanting to look at where, let's just say $50,000, where we would come up with that. If that is generating $380,000 a year right now, then 2% growth on that would be how much? I guess 8,000. It would grow kind of slowly.
Yes. So we factored in that growth when we looked at the overall projections of how much was available when we originally made that allocation.
It wasn't fixed.
No.
Okay.
And the way that it is structured with the 1%, with each group getting a percentage of the total, we won't have excess in that every year. But at the end, if TGT funds come in great and everybody meets their cap, then we'll be having the excess funds conversation at the end of the maybe even 11 years to decide how to talk about spending that. But that's good. That means that we're getting them their money earlier so they can start working with it earlier.
Okay, thank you.
That it? We'll move on then to the Sunflower Soccer update, and I believe we have someone here that can tell us what's going on out at the soccer fields, and then we'll have Nikki cover the finance piece of it. So, Kevin?
Yes, good afternoon, and I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today. My name is Kevin Beck, and I am the Vice President of the Sunflower Soccer Association Board of Trustees. The President was going to be here with me today, but he had a little business situation arise that he could not join us, so you're stuck with me, and hopefully I can fill in well for him. First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you. We have a new complex that we started out with last fall that added 619 paved parking stalls. It gave us restrooms for the first time since Sunflower Soccer has been in existence. We were able to tell Johnny to go find another job. We were able to add landscaping. We were able to add a new entryway to our park. All of these exciting things that we've now got as assets in a beautiful soccer park, including 2 new soccer fields to bring us to 13, are because of the transient tax dollars that you all approved, and we greatly appreciate that. we've been able to successfully put those into place from, as far as soccer is concerned. I wanted to share with you a little bit of some numbers from our tournaments that we've hosted over the last 2016 and then this spring as well, and give you some feedback on what we've had. I want to start with the 2016 Spring Governor's Cup. That was actually the very first big tournament that we hosted with the full facility open, and we were very pleased with the results. We had a staff that worked hard and diligent to bring in as many teams as we could to celebrate the new facilities with us and play some quality soccer. That weekend alone, we had 162 teams come to Topeka to play soccer. Of those 162 teams, 73 of them were out-of-town teams, and another 12 of those were out-of-state teams. So we are bringing people that are not just Topeka residents going out to play soccer. We're bringing them from other places. Then in the fall, we had our 2016 Harvest Cup. Again, we had 100 teams at that event. We had 42 of those teams were out-of-town teams, and we had 5 of those teams from out of state. We also had another tournament last fall. I do not have the numbers for that one, as that one is actually put on by a different organization than Sunflower, utilizing our fields, and we share revenues and costs alike on that. But I don't have those numbers, but I know that my team played in it, my daughter's team played in it. We were roughly around the same, about 100 teams, and I would imagine that split may even be a little bit higher on numbers of teams that we brought in from out of town and out of state, being that that tournament is a little more geared towards strictly competitive, where these other tournaments include recreational and competitive teams. So you can see that we're bringing some numbers. In addition to that, fall season, both 16, 17, or spring season 17, we're looking at about 1,300 kids, give or take, that come out and utilize our facility to play soccer. That's all including their families, and those are Shawnee County kids and families. Also some surrounding counties, Jackson County, we get maybe pull some from Douglas County. But we are bringing kids, and you can see the color and excitement out there on Saturdays and even some weeknights. So again, I just want to say thank you to the Transient Guest Tax Authority group for allowing us to do those improvements and to get these kids something that they've been waiting for a long time. On the operational side, I did want to let you know that since this project started and moved forward and finished, we have had a little bit of a change of pace at our facility. We went about roughly 9 months out of the past year without an executive director. Our previous one decided to move back to the north, I believe Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken, and took a different job. So we've been looking for a new full-time executive director. We have had one in the works since December, January of this past 2016, 2017. We hired a gentleman that is going to come to us that we are just so excited to have come to our facility and this community. He's a teacher from Fort Osage in Missouri. He has extensive background in soccer. He has a British accent, so it's even better for the soccer community. His name's Andrew Fletcher, and he is actually going to start full-time beginning on May 23rd, so right around the corner. He's been actively involved from arm's length throughout the spring as far as coming to board meetings, actively emailing back and forth. But just to give you an idea of who Andrew Fletcher is, when we hired him, we were wanting him to start right away. Basically what he said is, I would really like to do this, but you need to allow me to honor my contract for teaching as well as honor my coaching commitments to my kids this spring. That in alone tells you what kind of an honorable and good gentleman we have. He's already started making connections with some of the other groups in town. I believe he's visited with Visit Topeka, and has made several other contacts with the county and so on and so forth. So he's already hit the ground running. Again, we are very excited to have Andrew come. He has got many, many new ideas that he wants to bring before the board to try and generate different ideas for how we bring more people to Topeka, how we bring more people to our complex. In fact, one of the comments he said when we were interviewing him was, you know, the only bad thing about that complex is when it's empty. So he is very excited. He is interested in bringing cars and bodies and people to our complex, and that goes beyond soccer. It goes beyond what we are really invested in, and that's soccer. We are currently working with Visit Topeka. We're currently working with other entities to try and generate new opportunities. I believe we have a proposal going in with Visit Topeka here shortly to try and bring, and I'm assuming I can say, try and bring beat baseball to Topeka. It's a fascinating event that would bring several hundreds of people to our community and have fields full of baseball out on our complex. It'd be unique and an exciting opportunity for our community. We hope that they choose Topeka and choose to come and play at Sunflower Soccer. We're also working on several other opportunities, and as Visit Topeka has more that they can throw our way, we are certainly happy to entertain them and ready to hit the ground running with them to start generating other ideas and business opportunities and growth for Topeka. Really, that's the extent of what I had to offer you. I am here for any questions. I will say that as we move forward, being that right now we are being run by a bunch of volunteers that actually have other jobs as well, we will have more information to provide to you, good numbers, good information that Andrew will be able to share with you at future meetings.
Thank you, Kevin. I might add that I've been up to Sioux Falls, South Dakota and they have 6 fields up there that they have a big jazz and music festival, but they don't have a concession stand. So I think we're moving ahead and making waves here in Topeka. Do the people that travel from out of state, or even the 42 out of town teams, do they ever, I know when you're there, I've been through soccer too with kids and grandkids, but if you ever hear of, things that you are picking up from the players, the parents, about Topeka, or ideas that can help us improve, I hope you do share those too.
Certainly will.
So, are there any questions? Karen?
My understanding was that besides getting caught up, which you've done a wonderful job of, that there was interest in this body of knowing, a couple of years ago when you finished the project and everyone knew to the penny how much leftover money you had. That's gotten a little fuzzy in time, and lots of folks were spending it. They had a lot of ideas on how to spend it. At this point, that money has been held, I guess by us, but by the city, but with your name on it, at least
With
in
mine.
Velcro. But what, if you know, either of you, what that balance is, and then if you know what kind of discussions there have been recently. I know that periodically I've been involved in some brainstorming and conversations about what might best benefit the good of the order, but we wanted to hear what Sunflower Soccer was talking about.
Absolutely. Nikki, you probably have a number down to the penny for them, but I know it's around 360,000 roughly that's in the balance at this point.
Okay.
Yep, the year end at 2016 was 376,971, and then moving forward, depending on where we go with the projects, each year starting in 2017, we will be adding to that. It kind of depends on whether we start a new project and to what level that we're bringing any revenues in, but we'll be adding about 100,000 a year until we start doing another project or deciding where we're going from there.
So 100,000 a year, because we know what the bond payments are.
Yes.
There was a time limit. That was what, a 10-year?
Till 2032.
2032. So there's another 100,000 a year coming in all the way till 2032 over the bond payments?
Yes, unless we want to pay off the bonds early, we can do that, and then we would transfer the property back to Sunflower Soccer. So that is an option to pay down the debt. The resolution that was passed in 2012 is very specific that the 1% is to be used only for the 2 projects and paying the debt service, and that if we didn't have enough money to pay the debt service, Sunflower Soccer would be responsible. We never imagined that we'd have more money.
More money.
Which is a wonderful position to be in, but the resolution does pretty much restrict the funds to just those 2 projects.
To those 2 projects.
Yes, and paying off debt service. So if you want to start to do something else, then we might need to amend the resolution again.
And I can address some of what we have that we're thinking of, dreaming of, wanting to do on our complex as well. I don't know if you remember the history of how this all occurred, is that after the gas tax dollars were procured, the bid went out, or the plans went out for the original bid, and when they came back, they were actually over budget. And so they went back to the drawing boards, and the architect and engineers redrew some things, removed some things from our project, and then got the final product down to where it was under budget. However, they cut a lot of items out of our project that we don't have because of those cuts. So there are still things on our wish list that we would love to utilize the dollars to move forward with, depending on how much is there and how much we can accomplish with it. You know, things that we did not end up with was a championship field with stands. We still just have grass fields. We do not have any lights. If you're out there at night, we have wall packs on the building, but we have no lighting within that parking lot. And I know we got out of our board meeting about 10 o'clock Monday night, and other than vehicle car lights, it was pretty dark. So a wish list item is to put some lights in there. One, that will help us with safety around the parking lot, but two, if we can get some lit fields, that opens up another avenue, another door for us to do some other things with. So there are still things within the realm of the project that were never done. And we would ask that we are allowed to put together a formal plan, which again, we've been a little bit slow in doing because of change of leadership, where we want to have Andrew on board to come with a full presentation of what we would like to do with those dollars. We have a lot of ideas. We know that, for instance, as you come in our main entry, we have soccer fields to the left and right of our soccer fields. There are no fences. Balls get kicked into the entryway where the cars are. Kids run out after the balls. There's no security, no safety. We're thinking, can we put some fencing there that will, one, stop the balls, but two, stop the kids, most importantly, from going out in the street where the cars are traveling. Some other ideas we've had, were we need additional parking. I mentioned a year ago's Governor's Cup, 162 teams. We had some unfortunate occurrences that we actually had rain, heavy rain, the night before we were supposed to start. So we got there the first morning at 6 in the morning, and we saw field number 9 flooded. How are we going to start our tournament? And then we saw fields all over with water you could see in the light as it was coming up. We worked through that, but the thing that we didn't anticipate or know what to do with was that a lot of our overflow parking was grass. Sunflower Soccer's property is pretty porous soils that love water, and so when you drive on water-soaked porous soils, they sink. We did have some instances where cars were parking in the grass and they got stuck. We had to pull them out. So what we've learned there is, for where we want to head to bring more people, bring more tournaments, bigger tournaments, have the capacity to park them adequately and not get them stuck, we're going to need to look at other parking options. Whether that is a permanent paving solution with asphalt, or we've even talked about, is there an opportunity to do some more alternatives to green parking with reinforced turf grass. Some people call it grasscrete, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But the grass is there, but it's reinforced so that you can actually park on it and not have your tires sink. Some other things that we've learned through the growing pains is, with the current configuration of the complex, we have one way in, one way out, which is fine. However, with the building in the middle of our two parking areas, north and south, in between games it gets very hectic with people going to and from the building and cars trying to exit from the south parking lot. The people, we've heard of people that have waited over 20 minutes to get out of their parking stall in the south end, maybe even 30 minutes to get out of the parking in the south, because they're waiting for the people to go back and forth. We want to encourage pedestrian traffic. We encourage people coming to our complex, but we need to find potentially another solution to get people out of our complex so that they come back excited next time. So we do still have a lot of things that we are looking at doing. I know Andrew has other ideas that he would like to explore as well. So if we could keep the tax dollars as they're currently shown and allow us to bring forth a plan in the next few months, give him a chance to get his feet nailed down and off and running. We would love to do that and be able to show you what else we can do to generate more tax dollars. Heads in beds, sales tax dollars, things of that nature. Does that help?
Well, I hope so. I think we just wanted to be kind of brought up to date with how that was going. I know that some of the side conversations I've been involved with have tied back into the riverfront trails and the developments on the river, and, whether there were things other than right there within the complex alone that would make it a desirable destination complex, help Topeka compete with Blue Valley and the other complexes that developed, where there's some things that we could look at that, Brett's organization's doing, that we're doing overall in Topeka, that might make it, particularly for Kansans, a choice destination for tournaments, or at least for certain kinds of tournaments that could help us compete. And that's probably too much detail to go into today, but I do think, and I'll just speak for myself, but as you see these various agendas go by, often in their silos, but I get the advantage of sitting back and seeing how they interrelate to one another. How the levee, now that we're finally doing the levees and the levee trails can go in, and we need to engage the county, but is anybody making sure they all link up? And you guys are right on the way north, and if somehow connecting Sunflower Soccer with the north side riverfront and being able to rent a bike and go to Noto without having to take your car out of that darn parking lot, or even start there, started to have some, who knows, but some real possible legs under it to have families not only decide that they want to have their tournament in Topeka, but also instead of driving back to Johnson County on Friday night and Saturday night, that they would decide to stay here, which is the heads on beds part, because there's so much to do. That Brett and his folks who are already working with you, I know, have made sure everybody knows where the flea markets are and the goofy golf and all the other things. I've been a soccer mom up there for a total of what we were thinking, 30 years. And it just always killed me when people said, well, where is there to go? What is there to do? Oh, I don't know. So they'd go to the mall for a break, come back, and then go home. And we've already got them here, and with this investment, it's exciting to hear what you say about how the tournaments that we have are growing and so on. But yeah, if we can't touch the money anyway, it's not really an issue to even for you all to have to decide, I don't think, in 2 or 3 months, but it's good that you're looking at it, I think.
Yeah.
And
Start
thank you for
planning.
the update.
Just one of my own personal thoughts when you mentioned trails was we have a very large piece of property there, and it'd be
Yep.
nice to be able to ring it with a trail that goes around it. So if people do connect to a trail on the levees or wherever that may be, then they can make a circle around our complex and see the activities and be part of them. So
Well, most of us
another piece.
have had kids or grown-ups in events at Felker Park or at Crestview where the Shunga Trail goes by. And so you can go take that little sibling or the dog or whatever and go head out for a walk. And so, yeah, that kind of vision for you all too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nikki, is there anything else to follow up on the finance with the update on Sunflower? I think you've pretty much covered everything with it.
No, just I think, we'll have to work very closely with Mary here once we get to the point of kind of narrowing in that vision and talking about whether the scope of whatever we talk about fits into the original resolution, where and when do we need to amend? Do we need to amend the map? I mean, there's a lot of kind of, I think, financial and legal next steps that we all along the way need to be very conscientious of that original resolution.
Exciting times. Okay, we'll move on then. We have really pretty much talked about the downtown Pocket Park maintenance from TGT funds, which I had requested to be put on the agenda because of the discussion at the council meeting by Councilman Harmon. So is there any other comment that anybody wants to make about that, the Pocket Park maintenance? Okay. Are there any other items to come before the committee that, either from the public or committee members? Okay, with that word, adjourned. Oh, wait, Brett.
Finger.
Just real quick, talking about the food truck festival downtown and the Capitol being open, I wanted to say that like I said, for a couple years, I've been trying to facilitate that, and I've talked to a lot of different people. And if you have a chance to see Senator Laura Kelly or Representative John Alcala, they have been the two spearheads that finally listened and really got the ball rolling at a very quick pace. As long as this is dragged out, it actually happened very, very quickly once those two got involved. So if you see them out on the street, make sure to thank them for their efforts.
Thank you, thank you. Well, with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
What's the status of the 3-year visit to the contract? The same?
I thought the 360 was all that we had left. Oh, soccer money. I didn't realize.
It's 100.